Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Logan Emmett Hurley. He's so excited to be joined today by the distinguished Dr. Michelle Segar. Dr. Segar is a researcher, a teacher, an author, a public speaker at the University of Michigan, and a behavior change specialist. Also the author of No Sweat, and more recently, The Joy Choice in 2022. We're so privileged to have you on the podcast today, Dr. Segar. Please say hello and maybe tell us a little bit more about your research background and exactly what you do at the University of Michigan.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I had the pleasure of visiting a conference quite a few years ago and I almost fainted when I saw how people exercised on exhibition there. But basically, I conduct research really with a honed focus on how to help people change their mindset about exercising so they go from it feeling like a chore to feeling like a gift, and also teach them the specific strategy and tactics for being able to sustain it over time. My research has been complemented by a method that I developed in the 90s to actually achieve this. And I have had a coaching practice. And so in addition to the academic research I do, I guess I was calling myself probably a health coach way before people used to scratch their heads and say, in the 90s, because that wasn't even a thing back then. So by taking a research and real world approach to understanding the psyche and the sociology of exercise and how people feel about it, and as well as working with individuals, especially individuals who don't like it, who seem to stay stuck in a vicious cycle of failure of starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping, but never sustaining. And that might be very different than your clientele. I'm not sure because I haven't, interviewed any of your clients. But the vast majority of the population has been stuck in the vicious cycle of failure. And, my professional North Star has always been for the last 30 years, what do we need to do to help people escape it and get into what I call the successful cycle of lasting motivation?
Yeah, and I love that. And I can't recommend your book highly enough. We were talking off air a little bit earlier about No Sweat, and I was exposed to it through another one of our trainers had told me about you in your previous speakings. And I read it thinking, I know all there is to know about resistance training and exercise. And I've been doing this for a long time. And I've seen, tens of thousands of different clients over the years. And it was so refreshing. And I know this book is a little bit older now. 2015, I believe, is when it was published. But like you mentioned, you've been doing this since the 90s, way ahead of the curve with the health coaching. And I just really love the ideas presented within, because I feel like we struggle as coaches sometimes to really be empathetic to our clients, because I love exercise, right? Like I got into this field because I enjoy working out. I enjoy the discomfort that comes with it. And I couldn't agree more that I think most people, even our clients, really dislike the idea of exercise. I don't think we're unique in that perspective. Obviously, we've got some people who are outliers. Maybe some of our trainers are outliers there. But I think that's the average person just doesn't like exercise. And they're so overwhelmed with what they even think exercise means. And I know we're going to talk about this in much greater detail here, but I think I cannot recommend this book highly enough for anybody who's a trainer, new to exercise, has never exercised before, as just a way to really get your foot in the door and understand how much there is to be offered through proper minimal exercise. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So let's talk a little bit about the background of No Sweat, how you got into actually publishing this book. You mentioned some of your research in the 90s. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about your career path to get there, what it was like being a health coach, and then how that eventually led to your coaching practice and eventually into No Sweat?
Sure. Okay. So I decided to get a master's degree in kinesiology after living a couple of times in Spain, waitressing in Chicago, doing sales in Chicago. And, I just decided it was time to really figure out what I wanted to do. And when I took a really big step back in the early 90s and thought, like, what am I really like? What jazzes me? What do I love? And I love moving. And so I applied to a master's program in kinesiology. And to be completely honest, even though I guess this is kind of embarrassing, I didn't even know what the word kinesiology meant before I got into my master's program. And I conducted a study for my master's thesis where that really was the start of everything, and continues to guide me to this day. And basically what we were looking to see is whether exercise could benefit people psychologically, whether it could reduce depression and anxiety in cancer survivors. These are people who weren't undergoing treatment. They were about 4.5 years after treatment and living normal lives. And we found that it did. But part of what we learned that was completely unexpected came from focus groups about 3 months after our study had already ended. And we asked people, whether they were still exercising. And almost everyone said no. And I was like, what? I had just heard people talking excitedly, positively about exercise. And so in these different focus groups where people said the same thing, no, I stopped when the study ended. It was like, well, why did you stop? You've been sitting around the focus group for an hour, smiling, talking about exercise. Why'd you stop 3 months ago? And they basically said, I have kids, I have a job, I have aging parents, I have this, that, and the other. And it became clear to me in that moment that while these people had felt comfortable committing to exercise for our study, they didn't have the mindset and skill set to prioritize exercise within the context of their own lives, their own busy lives. And I thought, if people who had faced a life-threatening illness did not have what it takes to stick with exercise for themselves, then we have a real problem in society. And that was like this incredible, true light bulb that went off in my brain. And I said, this is my problem and I'm going to solve it. And that led me to get a second master's degree in health behavior and health education so that I could develop a program that I turned into a business. This was before I had my PhD. And after I delivered this program that I rebranded a few times, originally that was, in the middle called Fitting and Fitness, and eventually became Essential Steps. And after that, and I conducted an evaluation that suggested that it actually did lead to sustained physical activity long-term, which is a really almost unheard of in the literature, even to this day. And so that was like, okay, I got to learn more about research. I want to really be an expert on the psyche, on motivation and goal striving. And so I went back and got my PhD. And so a lot of the things that I did, now keep in mind that I developed my program before I was a behavioral scientist, and it was really completed before I was a behavioral scientist. But the concepts, and it did come out of theories from my second master's degree, but the concepts and the refinement came from delivering it with people. And all these questions kept arising. Well, why is this? And does this really, is it different? And so after I became a behavioral scientist, I started conducting research on the theoretical questions that my method that I'd been using, just amazingly with people were asking. And so that's what I've been doing ever since, is continuing to work with people. I consult with organizations and help them refine how they help people cultivate a positive and long-lasting autonomous motivation. I know that's a lot, so I'm just going to pause in case you want to react or ask me something else.
Yeah, no, I love that. I feel like I could just sit here listening to you talk about your journey and your story, because I'm sure you'd answer all the questions I have anyways. But I just think it's so interesting and so powerful for our listeners to realize that everybody goes through this. Like, this is the norm, right?
That's right.
The exception to the rule is the people like maybe you and me that really enjoy exercise and don't need, and even sometimes still do need that, extrinsic motivation to actually get up and go to the gym and put our shoes on, whatever it might be, to get out the door. I just found so much benefit too in the research backing, right? Big proponents of evidence base, right? We want to make sure that everything we're doing is aligned aligned with the clinical literature from an exercise perspective. But I think the exercise motivation piece, the behavioral science piece, is so interesting, and you tie it in so well with the story to, hey, you're not alone in this. This is what we thought, and it was completely wrong. And they tested it. And there were so many like aha moments for me. Maybe talk about a few of those that you experienced kind of going through the research initially for this book, where it's like, as I'm reading you describing this paper, I'm like, yeah, that's what I always thought. And then you read what the outcome was, and it's like, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
Well, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about research, is if you're doing it right, you should want to be wrong, because we want to make sure that our assumptions are not driving truth. And so, there was a big aha. Well, actually, before I tell you about my really big aha, I want to just point out something that you said that is just so on target. And it's really the place where everyone should begin. Anyone, whether it's your client, whether it's yourself, anyone who struggled with this. I just finished working with a client, and the program, the method. And I remember in our first session, just her saying, I'm not athletic enough. I've tried this so many times. And the place everyone needs to start is what you already said. And it's that this is almost universal. But because people believe they fault themselves, it prevents them from moving forward in an optimal way. And so helping people understand that it's universal is the place to start. And that's where I start in my own method, in fact. Now, I will tell you something shocking that was shocking to me that I write about in the book. And I think you might even know what I'm going to say based on what you already said. One of my hypotheses was that while I knew there were so many theoretical and lived reasons with clients that I knew weight loss was a terrible motivator for exercising, I assumed that health was a great motivator. Again, there's that word assumption. And so when we did a study, we had hypothesized that, of course, that weight loss would be associated with poor motivational profiles and worse day exercise. It was a year-long study. We also hypothesized that health, better health, improved health, whatever you want to call it, would be an optimal motivator. Because in theory, what's more important than having good health, right? And so, of course, you already know the punchline, which is that I was shocked to discover, and in fact, I thought that maybe there's something wrong with the data. I had to go through this whole morning phase. The data suggested that health as a motivator for exercise was as poor as weight loss. What? How can that be? Wait a sec. Let me bang my head against the wall. How shocking is that? And I say it so dramatically because over the years, so many people have come to me and told me that that's one of the things that they had always assumed, like I had. Of course, when you're in research and you get a finding that contradicts what you thought you were going to find, you're allowed to be confused and maybe a little disappointed, but your job as a researcher is to say, wait a sec, what could be causing this? Why is this? Is this an anomaly? Or are there theories and other bodies of research that are going to explain why health is actually a poor motivator? So I'm going to stop there and just see if you can answer that question. I think you might know why health is a poor motivator.
Well, I just find it so interesting. And I think this is such an important reminder as trainers too, that when we have those questions, we have those initial consults and sit downs with people, and we ask the few things that everybody says is the motivator, right? I want to lose some weight. I want to feel better, right? Be healthier. And almost without question, if you dive a little deeper, you're going to find those other motivations that a lot of times those really aren't the driving factors. People just think those are the things that they're supposed to say, right? They should want to lose weight. They should want to feel healthier, but really they're just feeling this pressure from society that they should lose some weight or they should feel better. And I've kind of lost track of your question there. I'll let you take it away with why health is not
Sure.
necessarily the best motivator. But please do, jump right into that.
Okay. Well, before I give the answer, something that is a really important caveat. that should always be said is that nothing is ever true for everyone. While some things might be true for most people, and I believe that's true, and and I believe that this falls in that category, it's important to realize that there are some people who are going to be motivated by better health. And there are some people that are going to have an optimal lifelong exercise participation because they are so concerned about their weight. But the deal is it's not most people. And the other part of the deal is that as a society, especially the fitness culture and healthcare too, people have been brainwashed to think about exercising as primarily a way for weight control, weight loss, or better health. So it's no one's fault. Again, we have to make sure everyone understands it's no one's fault that they may think that these are good motivators. It's the way we've been taught to think about it in society. So the reason why health is a non-optimal motivator for most people, there's a few reasons. One is, what is better health? How do we define that? What kind of feedback are we going to get that we're achieving our better health goal when we exercise? So that's one of the problems, is that we know for people to keep striving toward a goal, continually pursuing something, they have to receive continual feedback that they're achieving it. And better health doesn't necessarily provide that feedback. The other the second thing is, if you think about it, in theory, we care about having better health, but on any given day when we have to pick up our kids early from school because they have a fever, or our bosses send us an unexpected urgent job that has to be done by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, these other things are much more urgent. And so our ideal of better health just falls from theory to the bottom of our to-do list, not, only to be seen again when, the urgencies disappear. And that might not be until New Year's Eve or the beginning of summer, whatever. That's the second reason. Really, how compelling is exercising for better health when it has to compete with all these other urgent and important things related to our daily roles and responsibilities? That's the second reason. Number three is, we know from behavioral economics that human beings are more motivated by immediate, right now rewards, not ones that we have to wait for in the future, like disease prevention or hoping for better health next year or avoiding that dreaded disease that our doctors tell us we're at risk for. So those are the three core reasons health is a poor motivator for most people. For ongoing, it gets people to start, but it keeps them stuck in the vicious cycle of failure.
Yeah, and I think that's where you see a lot of the marketing actually in the fitness industry in general is let's do a body composition 30-day makeover, lose as much weight as fast as possible, and then what comes after that, right? We want to get those quick extrinsic rewards, see the changes happening, and then how do you sustain that in the long term? And I think that's a great transition to start talking about how do we get people to start thinking about exercise as an intrinsic, internally motivated reward system. This is for me to feel better, not I need to lose weight to look better. And as the book talks about, just the research on sort of flipping the script on that, what are some of the strategies, some of the exercises that you give to your clients or into the book that actually talk about how to reframe exercise as a whole so that it's something that's sustainable, something that you can do in the long term, and something for you?
Right. Well, we don't start with strategies. We have to start at the beginning, which is people's beliefs about what counts as valid exercise worth doing. And so we can't get people to change their strategies unless we get them to change their beliefs, because our behavior follows our beliefs. So that's the place you start, is by figuring out, well, what do I believe is exercise, is exercise? And, most people, even the most educated, and don't believe that things like walking count. In fact, I've been told things like walking or doing movement for 10 minutes or 5 minutes is dumbing exercise down or is a cop out. Or I just had one of my latest clients just came up. I can't remember the term she used. Deadbeat exercise. She called it deadbeat exercise. I love that. If people have these beliefs about anything that's less than, heart pounding, sweat drenching, hour-long exercise, well, guess what? And they don't like that, they're not going to be able to change their approach or their mind. So we have to start there.
So once we get people to understand and believe that everything counts, what do you use as a motivator to actually get them to really inherently understand that, to realize that it's not deadbeat exercise, that a 5-minute walk is better than nothing else? How do you use a research-based approach to really convince people of the importance of that, and then maybe help them find the activities that they'll enjoy doing that count for them?
Well, you just said it. You help people find the activities that will help them enjoy it. And that's pretty straightforward. What do? You ask them, you ask them, what do you think would feel good? And sometimes people have no idea. And so then you have to pivot and turn it into an experiment, right? I'm sure you know this from your work.
Yeah, for sure. And I think obviously we're a evidence-based, efficient company in the sense that our workouts are 30 minutes. So it's actually quite extreme for for people when they come in, and a little bit different than some of the recommendations in the book. But what I've found really beneficial when I'm talking to clients about no sweat is with everything outside of resistance training. Because for us, it's really about lifestyle transformation. And I think most people can commit to an hour a week with what we do at Discover Strength, and they understand, people are really starting to understand more and more that resistance training is beneficial. But it's the other however many hours of the rest of the week outside of there that they're going, okay, well, oh, how am I going to fit in my, 3 hours a day of zone 2 cardio, and, also ice baths and saunas and all the other things I see on social media, right? To really break it down where it's, no, let's talk about some strategies. What do you enjoy doing? Is it walking? Okay, well, can you fit that into your schedule? Let's start there. And I think that building on those strategies and starting to create some small habits that can add up and go, oh, I actually did do something productive today. What are some of the things you found most beneficial? And I know we'll talk about some of the strategies here, the alternative movement ideas. I have the whole list from in the book, but when you're going through with clients and trying to get them to understand and get themselves motivated to start moving more, what are some of the things you find are the most common that maybe they're surprised by when you go, hey, this counts, you can actually do this, and this will count as part of your exercise inventory?
Walking is the number one, and it's the best, because once people give themselves permission to count walking, and it's walking is so, for many to most people, actually that's too big of a generalization. Walking can be so pleasurable if, unless, we are joint, maybe we have joint pain or something. But I have found walking to be an incredible gateway to sustainable lifestyle physical activity. So you can do it anywhere. You can do it at your job. You can do it at home. You can do it when you're on vacation. It's this natural activity that as human beings, we evolved to do. And, it became this people often think about walking, for example, if you have to park really far away. Now, unless you're going to be late and you're going to get in trouble for that, or it's really going to ruin your day because of everything you have to do, people look at walking, unless people have been trained to think about it this way. Many people think about extra walking as a burden and work, quote unquote. But once you help people understand that it counts, people celebrate it. And then they start to strategize how they can fit more of it into their day.
Yeah, and I just love I keep coming back to the ideas and strategies in No Sweat. And I really think one of them that I enjoyed is just this idea of reframing, this exercise is medicine sort of approach that we have, where, I think you talk specifically about when we look at exercise as a dosage, right? You have to take your medicine. That's actually a really bad way to view it for most people, because if
That's
you
right.
look at the research, people are really bad at taking their medicine,
That's
whether
right.
it's
That's right.
insulin or heart meds or whatever it might be. If we think of, you have to do this because this is
Yes.
what's good for you, people are just terrible at sticking with it. So finding strategies that don't feel sometimes like exercise,
Yes.
whether it's adding that little walk in. And I think you had the grocery analogy in there, or maybe this was an analogy I wrote. It's been a little while, but it's people worry that this anything counts idea is too simple, but the reality is we as humans really like this idea of simple, right? Like we like the prepackaged, pre-made, pre-cooked, as opposed to, I definitely think this is from No Sweat. I don't think I came up with this, but making everything count as like snacking, right? It's almost too easy. Where if you're following guidelines, if you have these strict rules and regulations of what counts and what doesn't count as exercise, it's like having to prepare this 10-course meal for
That's right.
everybody, and it's super stressful and it can seem really unobtainable. And I don't want to harp on social media too much because I think it gets a horrible rap as it is, but there's these images and these ideas that we have to be doing something crazy all the time. You have to do some sort of exercise. I mentioned it a little before. You've got a sauna and then ice bath and then
Yeah.
do your 3 hours of zone 2 and do all these
Yeah.
things. And it's just not sustainable for the average person. So I'd love to sort of talk about, we've obviously touched on walking, some of these other, catchy alternative movement ideas that you list in the book. And we can certainly go into some of these in a little more detail, but I think it's just important to really frame it up for people of what really counts, what we're talking about here.
Right.
Obviously, the long cut, that could be something like parking further away.
Love
right?
the long cut.
Yep.
And by the way, I did not develop that term.
Okay.
I heard it somewhere else and I can't remember where I heard it, but I don't want to take credit for a term. It's an awesome term. So
yeah.
long cut. It's like, instead of trying to take the shortcut, make it long, right? So, and you can do that anywhere. You can do it before a meeting. You can do it before you pick up your kids from daycare, and then you give them a long cut too. You make it long so you get extra movement, even if it's 2 minutes more, up to, who knows, 30 minutes more. But the point of those alternatives that I list in the book, the catchy tactics, if you will, is to play, right? If we can, and as you know, I have the It's Your Move game in the book too, which really asks people to think about all of these things which constitute a bunch of different opportunities to move that are everywhere in our day if we only have been taught to look for them.
And how do you encourage people to really start to grasp these ideas? And do you even encourage them to maybe record what they're doing, or is it more of just a be conscious of it as it's happening? So it's not even that. It's not even creating a journal and keeping down. I took the long cut today. It's more just, this is an opportunity. Let's take it and jump on it. Talk to us a little bit more about the psychology behind that.
Sure. Well, people are different, and I would say that people will do, what is going to work best for them. If you make it laborious by having to journal about it, then it might turn even these wonderful gifts of opportunity moves, or what one of my clients, I love what she did. She calls them OTMs. What kind of OTMs did you get today? Opportunities to move. It depends on the individual. I think it's something that you want to turn into a game instead of work.
So in the long term, because you've obviously been working with clients for decades now, with these strategies, and I'm sure they've evolved over the years. What have you noticed when people start to incorporate these strategies into their daily routines? What is your long-term goal with someone? Is it simply to create movement on a daily basis, or do you have a larger picture goal? You want to add in some other more regimented movement, or is it all about just keeping it fun for the rest of their lives and making sure they're moving? How do you maybe make that transition to the next stage, if there is one?
Well, I would never impose goals for any individual. So really, it's really going to be up to the individual. I mean, I value planned, structured exercise, and I valued opportunities to move. And what I found over the decades is that opportunities to move literally is the bridge for people to think of themselves as physically active individuals, to develop an identity as a physically active individual, which is just about the strongest motivator you can, an identity and getting immediate positive feelings while you're moving your body. That's probably the core driver of sustainable physical activity. Although, again, there's a disconnect between what you guys do, because feeling good is not the goal while they're in session with you. But I would propose that if you want people to be more active from a lifestyle perspective and to be able to sustain it long term, is you want to guide them to be active in ways that feel good to their bodies while they're doing it. Again, people have been taught to take their medicine and to take it, to do it, to no pain, no gain, do it until it burns. That is absolutely the wrong message for most people. The other thing I want to say about sustainability ties back into what you said about the 10-course meal. If that reflects the all or nothing thinking that our society has taught us to have about exercise, it's not a snack. It's not an opportunity to move. If you're going to do it right, you better do the 10-course meal or else you fail. If it has to be a rigid definition and you can't do the all, there's only one option: nothing, right? And actually, that's the whole topic of the Joy Choice, my second book, how to help people break out. It's not as much about motivation as it is about how to break out of the all or nothing thinking jail that so many people have. Again, this is circling back to the beginning. It's not people's fault. They're stuck in all or nothing thinking. It's the way we've been taught to exercise.
Yeah, and I can't recommend the Joy Choice enough either. It's coming out on paperback, or it's maybe already come out on paperback at this point. So definitely pick up a copy of that as well. Again, I would say No Sweat is more of the overall principles, right? And then the Joy Choice is more the actual actionable strategies, but both work hand in hand together and are great books and really work even if you've already got a well-rounded routine, like you're a client, you've got the resistance training piece down, we know how important that is and how much benefit you can get from that, but you're struggling with, what do I do outside of here? How do I compete with the other people that I know that are weekend warriors that are doing all these other things, and I feel like I'm inadequate and I'm not keeping up and doing enough? And I just think the grace that you talk about people giving themselves and really understanding that a little bit can go a long way. And like you just said there, shifting that idea of your identity and who you are. And I'm a person who makes that choice to move. Even if it's not it doesn't have to be a marathon. It could be, hey, I see that spot up front. Yes. It's right there and I'm not going to take it. I'm going to park my butt in the back of the Costco parking lot and we're going to haul our stuff back and forth. And I think that's so powerful, just to empower people that way and have them know that that is a little victory and they can build on that and it can be sustainable. Like you said, please go ahead.
It is. There are so many little victories all over our days. Going back to what you said, what helps people when people start to recognize them, they feel successful all the time and they pat themselves on the back. And, think about it. If you start to pat yourself on the back a few times a day for succeeding with physical activity, even if it's only a minute and a half or 7 minutes, you start to feel more generally, you start to develop even a greater sense of mastery about your ability to do things that are important to you. I mean, just think about how these things feed each other. It's such a positive thing for people to appreciate and learn to grow in themselves. And for people who are parents, I always like to say, the more you talk out loud about this stuff, the more you'll be modeling to your kids. A long time ago, people are like, exercise with your kids and you'll be teaching them, how to be active for life. And there's some important wisdom in that. But we don't want to teach our kids that it has to be this structured 10-course meal to be worth doing. What I would propose is we actually want to teach our kids that life doesn't turn out on a daily basis according to plan. And the way we can best take care of ourselves is when we learn how to pivot dynamically in the moment. Something I talk about a lot in the Joy Choice that, really has just come alive for me since working on that book is the idea that think about exercise and the 10-course meal and the whole mindset in the fitness industry that has been propagated. But in life, forget about exercise. Think about it. What if, in order for us to love our spouses, they had to do everything right? Or to love our kids or keep them in our house, they have to do everything right. In life, guess what? We have to be flexible and bend in the wind and fall on the floor and pick ourselves back up and pick our kids back up. I mean, our businesses have to pivot. You know, everything pivots and bends with the wind because the wind in life never stops blowing. But we haven't, the transfer, the translation of that wisdom of the ages hasn't infiltrated most people's perspective when it comes to exercise and healthy eating. They think they've got to do it right or it's not worth doing. And that's really what gets in people's way.
Yeah, I love that idea of just discovering opportunities and challenges. It makes me think of I think it's Ryan Holiday's, the obstacle is the way. And just that sort of stoic mindset of whatever the challenge is, right? Let's rise to it. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be opportunities to shift. The real question is, how can you find something that's going to be sustainable, that's going to work with those shifts, because they're always going to happen. And we look at these people, whether it's celebrities or whether it's Instagram influencers or whoever it might be, that like, oh, well, they fit it in every day. And it's like, well, that's their job. Their whole job is to be in shape. Like, they don't have to deal with all the other, stressors of normal life that the rest of us have. And you don't have to be that person. You can be the best version of yourself by making those choices and making, like you said, moving with the wind and shifting and adapting. And I just love that message. And I think it's something we don't hear enough in our industry is, again, like I said already, just giving yourself a little grace and some opportunity to find some sustainability and find something that works for you in the long term. Tell me a little bit more. Go ahead, but
I just want to add one thing because I think it's really important to this message. Sometimes bending in the wind means we don't do anything. And I believe you have to actually give people permission to not even take a 1 minute or 2 minute opportunity to move, to say, I can't do it right now. I've got to get this out. I'm so stressed out about these emails. I've just got to get down to 50 today in order for me to be present with my family. And that means I can't take an extra minute or 2 minutes for the long cut. And when people start to give themselves permission, even to do nothing, as long as it's in a context of freedom and personal choice, then they can truly own it. Because if people feel they always have to do something, then even the little bit doesn't feel like a choice. So we always want it to be a choice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop.
No, that's a great additional add-on too, because again, even the freedom that we're talking about here can feel like it's got some boundaries. If it's, well, now I always have to do this thing and I always have to park at the back of the Costco lot. It's like,
that's
well,
right.
if you've got other things to do, obviously you can find those opportunities later. But I think, and I'm pretty sure you would agree with this, and you've probably seen this in your own practice, is the more people give themselves the freedom to do that, and the longer they stay with this sustainable idea of, I have the opportunity to find these opportunities to move, the less and less likely they probably are going to choose to do nothing, right? Because they've got more tools in their tool belt, as you talk about in the book. They know, hey, I can do emails, but I can, read them and do a little jog in place or whatever it might be, and find those opportunities. But like you said, giving them permission and letting them give themselves permission to say, hey, today's not the day.
Yes.
We'll get back at it tomorrow. I think, you don't have to be perfect all the time. I think that's such an important point to have. Any other parting advice? And I'd love to tell you, or you to tell us a little bit more about the certification program that you're launching potentially in the beginning of 2024, if people are interested in learning more about that. But maybe a little, if there's any other parting wisdom you have from No Sweat, things that maybe we missed, and then you can go into that, and then maybe tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and some of your writing.
Sure. Well, thank you. Our reasons for initiating a behavior are the foundation of the behavior. They have a domino effect on the quality of our motivation, whether exercise feels like a chore or a gift. And that determines whether we constantly self-regulate. And that's a really jargony academic term that just means manage exercise in our life. Do we plan it into our schedule? When a challenge arises, are we just, is that the easy excuse? Whoop, I don't have to do it. Or do we go, this is so valuable to me and compelling to my day. It helps me feel better. It helps me fulfill my roles and responsibilities in ways that I know I'm really doing the best I can do today. So our reasons for initiating exercise are just critical. I hope that your listeners will really think about what their motivators, their true or the motivators that they think they should have and have tried to have. And if the reasons or the whys for initiating exercise, if you haven't had sustained motivation, the first place you go to is the why. So I want to just tell people that. And motivation, you can't deal with the other part, the self-regulation, the self-management, the coping, until you've got your motivation figured out. And then there are all these other things you can do with the self-management, the tactics, the beliefs about that. And we didn't spend as much time on that, but I just wanted people to think about it as two things and to direct people to think about starting with your why and focusing on uncontaminating your motivation so that it feels like a gift you want to give yourself instead of a chore.
Yeah, thank
So,
you. Thank you for touching on that, because I think the idea of the gift is very powerful. And but before I forget too, I was looking on Amazon today. No Sweat is having a big discount right now. I think it's like $8 on Amazon. So pick up the soft cover. Will not regret it. And then please tell us a little bit more about the program that you're offering, at least as of today. So who knows? It might not be that cheap when
yes,
so.
I'm happy because I'm deep in the development. So, over the years, I've trained not too many people in my method, but I decided the method consistently converts a client or patient from a chore into a gift very systematically within a month. And I just decided I've got to make time to develop a certification program so that other people to scale the effects in the world. And so probably starting early 2024, I'm going to be certifying people in my method. I'm still working out the details of that, and I'm going to be doing a pilot training program, certification program this fall, but it should be ready to go. So I guess if any listener is interested in that, they should just go to my website, which is my name, michellesegar.com, and shoot me an email that this might be something. Nothing is up anywhere about this because it's in the middle of or toward the end of development. But on my website, there's an option to sign up for my newsletter, which I send out once a month with updated science and how it applies both on an individual level for consumers who read my newsletter, but also for professionals in healthcare and fitness, and how they can think about using the new science when they work with clients or patients. So that's my advertisement for my website, which is michellesegar.com.
Yeah, and please check that out. Please check out No Sweat and the Joy Choice. We'll link to all of those things in the description for this podcast. And again, I think for our listeners who are research focused, which would be, I would imagine, a large portion of our listenership, is interested in what the research has to say. I think you'll be blown away reading through this book of, like you said, the assumptions, right? And I, long ago heard a quote that's, they say, assume makes an ass out of you and me, right? So I think we take our assumptions and we push them to the side, and you'll be blown away by some of the things you discover in the clinical literature about what actually gets people to retain habits. And it is such an important read for me, and something like I've mentioned multiple times I share with a lot of my clients now, because I think the sustainability habits and tips in here are so important. Anything else you'd like to share before we let you go today? I'm sensitive to your time. I know we got to get you off of here.
No, I'm so well. I just want to thank you for inviting me to share, the work I'm most passionate about with you guys and your audience.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Segar. And thank you everyone for listening. Again, we'll link to michellesegar.com in the notes, but it is just her name and you can check it out. You can go on Amazon. Right now, No Sweat is on sale. Hopefully it'll still be there by the time we publish this episode. And thank you again for joining us today, Dr. Segar. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks.